As you can see, we have two more guests on our stage. The first, a woman, Sarah Spiekermann. Sarah chairs the Institute for Management Information Systems at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, WU, Vienna. She's the author of the book Ethical IT Innovation, a Value-Based System Design Approach. In addition to this work, she has published almost 100 scientific articles on the social and ethical implications of computer systems and given many presentations and talks about her work around the world. She also maintains a blog on the Standard, the Ethical Machine, one of the leading Austrian newspapers. And to her left, from your view to the right, Professor Dr. Andreas de Bruin. He teaches at the Munich University of Applied Sciences and through joint educational research also at Ludwig Maximilians Universität in Munich. His teaching and studies focus on meditation and mindfulness, and in particular the impact dimensions of these practices. He's the founder and head of the Munich model meditation at university, as well as a free public series of events called Spiritual Teachers and Their Concepts. Since it starts in 2010, the program has continuously expanded with more than 150 students attending courses each semester. We will hear from that in a few minutes. But as we have a short time, and I'm supposed to be critical as the journalist here on the podium, I have to condense my nice questions to one critical, of course, to Mr. Davidson. Let me say two arguments concerning mental exercise. As far as I know, in the Second World War, the Japanese kamikaze pilots, they underwent a Zen meditation training. These kamikaze pilots were very aware about what they did. So they were even more able to give up their lives and commit suicide attacks on American warships, killing thousands of souls. A second example, given the fact that we can train empathy with scientific help or with mental exercise, that does not prevent this great ability for empathy that is used by torturers to even torture people better. So what I want to say is there's a hype about awareness and empathy that neglects the fact that both can be used in unethical ways. Empathy is not yet human compassion that supports a common well-being. Do I see that wrong?
No, I think that you're raising a very important issue, and it's an issue that we think about all the time. When you go back to the original context in which these practices were developed, they were developed within an ethical framework. And in modern society, in the application of mindfulness, in so many different areas, in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, I think that ethical framework has been lost and is really unfortunate. When these practices are taught in an authentic way, they need to be embedded within an ethical framework. And the very first foundation of that ethical framework is non-harm. And so when in our little meditation that we did together, the very first thing we did is after we settled to invoke the intention that we're doing these practices not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of others. And so that ethical framework is really crucial. In fact, one of the things that we don't know from scientific research is the extent to which simply the invoking of that ethical framework itself may have some benefit independent of the actual practice. And yes, it's true that you can learn the kind of attentional training that is part of mindfulness and become a better shooter, killer. But that is really not how these practices were originally framed, and we believe it undermines the emotional balance, which is really at the core of these practices.
So not harm would be one ethical guideline. What would be others?
Well, the Dalai Lama wrote a book not too long ago called Ethics for a New Millennium, and he lays out a number of ethical principles that he believes are universal ethical principles. It would take too long to go through all of them, but just to give one example, one is one that he calls, that really is the first one, that he calls the ethics of restraint. The ethics of restraint, being able to exercise self-control. And in fact, there's very good scientific evidence that indicates that a child's ability to exercise self-control when she or he is 4 and 5 years old is a better predictor of major life outcomes when they're young adults. Outcomes like physical health, the extent to which a person may abuse drugs, antisocial behavior and criminal convictions. Self-control is a better predictor of that than IQ, grade point average, and standardized test scores all put together. So this is an indication of the importance of these kinds of what we can think of as universal ethical principles that have far-reaching impact.
Thank you. Sarah Spiekermann, Professor Spiekermann, you are currently doing 2 scientific studies about online addiction because you found how many of your students suffer under stress caused by the urge to be online, to be in, but online. The consequences, they cannot concentrate more, they feel passive, lose friendship. It is somehow an alienation process. Can you tell us more about how you introduced meditation techniques in order to raise the awareness level of the students?
Yeah, it's very sad actually that these days you only get students to meditate, I have the impression, by either telling them about brain studies, so scientific evidence that you should be doing it, or what we do at my institute is we are using technology tools where we tell them how cool it is to use a headband on your brain to measure your ability to meditate, things like that. So we give them those devices or the Headspace app on their mobile phone and we tell them try it out, and we actually had them do an attention test at the beginning of the study period, and then they use the technology, and then they use the attention test again, and we show them how they're getting better at scientifically at being able to pay attention. It's really sad that we have to use this kind of technique to convince them about doing it, and especially at a business school, it's almost impossible to do it in a different way. I cannot tell them, you know, remember your Christian tradition, something like that, or it's hard. You have to go through the back door.
But what can you say after several months of study? The study is going on, as I understood. What is the outcome in the meanwhile? What would you say?
I can't present hard facts on what the attention test resulted in, because what happened is that all the people involved started to think about their media usage. They started to put more attention as to how much they use the smartphone and the email. And on average, a Vienna, a WU student receives, if he or she's normal, 80 to 90 messages a day. And many even more, 130 messages a day, where they go ping pong with other people. And this is just a situation for them that is unbearable. They get into a mode of self-interruption all the time, and they are not able to perceive flow anymore. So they start to be unhappy. The hours that they spend on this bullshit, to honestly say it, is actually keeping them awake at night. So they lose on the hours that they actually need to study, and then the result is that they're all extremely tired. And this kind of thinking about what's happening actually, this is what was the most important outcome from the course, because all of that finally improved their attention skills in the end.
As I understood, you use apps. What do these apps do?
Well, actually there is a very famous app. It's called Headspace. I don't know whether there is this presumably monk who spent some time in Tibet and so on, and he came up with this. You install it on your smartphone, and then it tells you how you meditate, and you start with a few minutes, and he gives you some instructions, just actually as you just did. And by now there are millions and millions of people. I don't want to say hundreds of millions of people who have learned to meditate with this app. It just works really well. And I mean, now a lot of meditators here in the audience, they think this is a childish way to do it. It's not serious enough, you know. But the thing is that in fact, I gave it to my sister, and she started out playing, and then in the end, after a year, she started to become interested in going to visit some proper courses. So it's an entry into this field.
Maybe I didn't watch you in the audience. Maybe some of you have recorded Professor Davidson while he was giving his meditation exercise to see it tomorrow morning again and tomorrow morning again. So we don't know. You know.
Happy that you have it, and please feel free to use it. It's free.
Professor de Bruin, our university system, especially since the invention of the so-called Paulownia process, is schooling students somehow one-sided and their cognitive performance. It is all about fact knowledge, data and statistics. The training of the mind and the personality seems to be outdated, in fact neglected totally in the educational process. What did you do at the Munich University to strengthen the human values like empathy, like compassion and altruism?
Well, first of all, you said it before 2010 I started with 15. I had 15 places for a course in meditation and mindfulness. I'm practicing mindfulness and meditation by myself, and I saw the benefits. So I thought, well, is the time right? And especially thanks to you, Richard, and your colleagues, your amazing work. It was also possible that people know at universities that we just not sitting around doing nothing. So 15 places and 65 students wanted to join the course. This was a good sign. Yeah. So what for me it was important. First of all, it was important that through meditation and mindfulness, you get a better connection to yourself. And maybe you see also a lot of things that not so worthwhile. Learning to pass by your emotions or your thoughts. And the most important part for me was the creativity inside that to bring it to the fore. So, and of course the other things came also to it, like better coping with emotions, like stress reduction, fear for exams, to reduce that. And we started, it's now a program, like you said, it's now 150 students spread over 9 fields of studies, degree programs at 4 faculties at 2 universities. But if you see, for example, the study interdisciplinary and general studies, only for 15 places, 700 students wanted to join the course. Also this semester, last semester, etc. And this is in Vienna, this is in Munich, excuse me. But I think this would also be in Vienna. And I'm traveling now abroad to other countries in Germany and also abroad in other countries. And I think it's So, we do a lot of exercises, and some use Headspace, right? But a lot of students want to know more about dealing with the mind and with their thoughts. This is the most thing, and they're searching for serious environments where they can learn to cope with this. And one of the places is the university. And for me, it was very important to build it in different kinds of studies. So, for example, pedagogic and education in childhood, psychology, social work, nursery, and so on, teacher education, special care education, and so on, so that the students learn the techniques and then bring them into their profession later.
How do you see the chances that these training programs can be implemented at schools, for example, or at universities?
Well, what we see is, of course, not all the students. I had now, so more or less 1,600 students at least meditating half a year in my courses. And I wrote some articles. You can write me an email or look at the website. You can download it. You can see movies. I like to share also, like Richard also said, use it, take it. A lot of students, of course, first want to have some interest. They have some interest and they want to know more for themselves. But there are also ones who want to take it seriously, and they try to learn more techniques, go to serious schools. And actually, it's 2010 that some of my students continued the courses. We have not only one, we have more courses. And I have now some students also who went to other schools and now take over my lessons, partly. And I think those students will bring it really into society. And I'm sure, because I've seen a lot of them now, I'm sure a lot of students, younger students, but also older ones who like to learn new things, they will help to change society.
You gave me the word changing society at the last round for all three. The well-being skills that were presented by Professor Davidson are awareness, connection, insight into the self, and purpose. And he said, when we cultivate well-being, then we can improve our daily health. But the question is, okay, daily health is something that is still connected to the self, to myself. The question is, how is it connected to the other, to our community, to the well-being of the society, and probably, it's a high word, system change. Does these 4 pillars of well-being also have an impact on system change? I'll let you answer the last. maybe for...
I want to comment. Well, I think that societal change is obviously extremely complex, and there's not any single ingredient that is going to be the only answer. But I do think that change at the individual level is going to be required. It's not going to be sufficient. As people begin to cultivate these qualities and do it both individually, but also do it in groups and appreciate. I mean, one of the elements of well-being is connection. That's really all about our relationships with others and our relationship with the planet, our connection to place, not just to other people. And so I think this will be a really important vehicle for change. And as people begin to taste this experience, it will motivate them to engage in activities to promote change at organizational levels. I think the two go hand in hand. I think that we need both in order to produce systemic change.
Is this also your experience at the University of Economics? Because we live in somehow in a neoliberal cage, someone said, yeah. So we had to compete. Yeah? Otherwise, we will not succeed and so on. But does this awareness meditation also help to raise a culture change somehow also in the economic level?
So what I see, I think there is a split in society. Because the people in the cinema are all a majority, perhaps people who are interested or developing those 4 pillars, also with the help of spirituality and meditation. However, I just recently did a survey among the students, and we surveyed 700 people. And we asked them about how much they would be messaging with others and live their friendships. And there are two clusters basically who are interesting here. One cluster that is sending these 130 messages a day and is in a certain always ping-pong kind of passive online world. And there is another cluster that uses these media to, WhatsApp to make a personal assignment. And these latter ones, of course, are probably like many people here in the room who do meditation and who have a certain way of life that we think is changing society for the better. Unfortunately, the first cluster is about 4 times as big. And that was, for me, extremely shocking. And there is an interesting Professor Harrison at Stanford who recently gave an interview in the NZZ and who was talking about his students. And he said, well, the problem is that many of them are Borgs. Borgs is from Star Trek. And Borgs are people who are just existing as a community, and they are doing ping pong, and their memory structures are changing not for the better, but they're changing for the worse because they don't have enough experience and enough memory structures building up through real experience. They're just doing this all day long, and they're doing it for years now, and it has changed the way who they are. And the problem is that group is much more bigger, and it's outside of that cinema.
Professor de Bruin?
Well, related to your point now, I worked with 2,000 unemployment youth before I became a professor. And what I've seen is that the problem of youth is the connectedness. If you don't have a place in society, maybe you are looking for other directions to have some acceptance. And I think it's very important, like the exercise we did, we have to feel connected again. And I think then we can, well, this huge group still, I'm optimistic that we can reduce it, the group. And what I've seen is interesting, if you see it also systematically, then of course there are a lot of people in powerful positions. And of course those people have to change also. And if more people practice these things, empathy and connectedness, etc., then you will see that the other things don't work anymore. And then you will see the change also on this big
It will become
part.
more attractive. Yeah. So we give the famous last words to Professor Davidson.
Well, let me comment on these issues just very briefly. This will be my last words. The Buddha described in his Four Noble Truths that the first noble truth is suffering. Change comes from the recognition of suffering, and you depicted a scenario of suffering which is occurring on a large scale in our culture, and as people become more honest and recognize the nature of the suffering more clearly, it will be itself an important motivator. And then also, it's very important to bring back to mind, I often think about this, in the 1960s in the United States, when relations between the races were really quite difficult, there was segregation, Martin Luther King gave a very famous speech in Washington, D.C., and this was when conditions were quite terrible. And the title of his talk was not, "I Have a Nightmare." I have a dream. Thank you.
Professor Spiekermann, Professor De Bruin, and Professor Davidson, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention and that you have been coming. And there's some possibilities now to sign the book, I think. Thank you and goodbye.